Hi class, Mr. Gilbert. Just thought I'd give you a little demo on some drawing technique that may help you guys with the color pencils. And it's probably a little too late since project one has already come and gone. Sort of the disadvantage of doing this remote is that I can't watch you guys as you're working. So I'm sort of seeing things after the fact and then thinking about things that I should have said earlier or should have showed you earlier. But anyway, this will serve you whenever you go back to using any kind of drawing media, really. So hopefully it'll be useful, even though it would have been nice to have gone over this before. Better late than never, right? So, all right, so the color pencils. Let's say that we want to fill in this shape with a certain color. I just had this random shape right there and I want to color it in. So probably the best way to do that is when I think about what color you're going for. If I'm going for a light blue, then I'd probably start out with my lightest blue shade and just sort of start stroking and follow the contour of the shape and keep the strokes kind of parallel, moving in the same direction. And if I'm having trouble, I don't want to go over the edge. I want to make it kind of neat and clean. Start at the edge and then work my way in. Okay, and that's rather than, say, like scrubbing it, like kind of color it in like this. Okay, you can see if I'm doing it this way, I'm getting strokes going all different directions, and it kind of builds up an uneven appearance, whereas if I go all the same direction, I get a much more even application of color. And just build it up slowly in layers, okay? This light color blue really doesn't get very dark. And so if I were trying to get this to look like that color, I'd have to put a ton of layers on there, and that's just going to build up a waxy surface, which is kind of undesirable. So go with a little darker and just use less pressure, and you can still get that lighter blue. Another really important trick to use is called using a shield. So if I've got, I'm just going to use any sort of random piece of paper or cardboard. This is an old grocery list. This will work just fine. So if I want to make that edge clean, this is a much better way to do it than changing direction, because now I've got this sort of, and you can see, it's just not as, and I've got these two different directions going, and that's maybe not as desirable as just having the one single direction. So I'm going to do this side, sort of the preferred way I would call it, is to use a shield to create the edge that I want to create. And then the strokes continue in the same direction. And I can even sort of curve it around as well. I'm going to blend, feather those strokes together. So feather them together so that they blend nicely, instead of abrupt ending and then starting again. You get this overlapping effect in the middle. Okay, so if you give yourself a little space, then you can sort of feather those strokes together, and you won't get this obvious overlapping. Maybe it's kind of hard to see in the video, but it does look pretty obvious from here. So if I just do all these strokes across, and then I go in and try to add on to it, and I've got overlap in the middle, and there's this edge here, this edge here. So if I kind of feather the strokes together a little more randomly, then I don't get that nasty overlapping edge. Okay, and then again, like I said, you can curve. Go back to this other blue. You can use this to create curves by sort of using the shield, or you could cut a curved shield out too. Might be nice to do that. So by feathering together, I mean that you're going to use a short stroke and a long stroke, short stroke, long stroke, medium stroke, long stroke, sort of vary the length, and then they're ending in different spots. And then when you pick up to continue them, you're starting in different spots. And that way you get a more even transition from one stroke to the next. It's just a little trick that you can do as you're going across a shape, okay? And then go in cross hatching. You can fill it in nicely that way as well. So we'll go cross hatch strokes. If I want to get darker, I would switch to a darker blue. I wouldn't try to put too much, I wouldn't press too hard, and that just builds up a really waxy kind of rough surface. Go to the darker blue, or even blend in some black. So here's something you can do if it's not getting dense enough. Like you want to make this blue more dense. That's about as much as I can do without overworking it. So I can go in with a black and sort of hatch in some black strokes among the blue strokes to give it a little more darkness, and then go over it again with the blue maybe. Don't be afraid to layer multiple colors together. That often makes it look far more interesting than if it's just single colors. Starting to get a little overworked in that area right there. Okay. We can cross hatch it. And go a different direction, make it even more dense. Alright, so use your darker, sort of the darkest one you can get away with, I would say, in this case. It's not always the same for other media, but for colored pencils. So what happens is if you're putting the layers of color on the right way, you should get some of the white paper showing through to make it more luminous. So if you're completely covering the paper, then it builds up this waxy stuff, which can look, it looks a little bit, I don't really like that. I don't know, some of you guys may prefer it, but for me, I'd rather keep the strokes from building up too much, so that it doesn't look overworked. So if I need to get darker, I would just go in with some more darker blues. Right, and then this example here, I sort of practiced over here. This is a way to get, so you can go with a green. You could just go with a green, right? Make a shape with green. I don't like that one very much. There we go. And then I'm going to put in some more of this. Alright, so that's one way to do green, is just to use green. But what's kind of interesting sometimes is if you use something to mix it together or mix other colors into it. So this one's got a layer of blue hatching and then a layer of yellow hatching. And optically from a distance that'll look more greenish, but it'll be maybe a little bit more interesting than if you just use a straight green. All right. Cross-hatch it a little bit. So two different greens, but one's got a little more complexity to it. This one's a little more straightforward. So those are options for you. And of course you can always do like what we did here, is mix several different blues together to make it more, more varied and interesting, okay? Like I said, I don't really like this. That's nice and dark, but it also, when you look at it closely, it has this waxy kind of overworked appearance. So I'm not a big fan of that. I could be wrong. I mean, there could be some colored pencil experts out there that think that this is the way to go, but to me, anytime you're having to press really hard into the paper, no matter what media you're using, whether it's pencil or whatever, it just tends to look overworked, and it also pushes into the paper and actually kind of damages it a little bit. So it's kind of nice to, you know, if you need to get darker, go to a darker shade of pencil, like that's an HB. So if I go with a 2B, now my strokes get darker. So that's the way you kind of want to control it. Is don't overwork it, but use the appropriate darkness of tool, I guess you would say. All right.